What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Meaning of Podcast. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And this is it, guys. This is the episode you guys have all been waiting for. We are talking about one of the greatest directors of all time, if not the greatest director of all time. Depends who you are, but we are talking about him, guys. It's Steven Spielberg himself. We're breaking this down in two podcasts. The first one is going to be all about his genre films, which are the sci-fi fantasies, the blockbusters, kind of what gave Steven Spielberg his name. And the second podcast that we release a week later is going to be all about his historical dramas, or his dramas themselves, or anything that probably can be a little bit more grounded in history. But unfortunately, we're going to be reading your comments from the last episode, which was Rian Johnson's Star Wars.
Uh-oh. Yeah.
I'm kidding, not unfortunately. Most of you guys were pretty positive. I know a lot of it has been pretty split as far as people's thoughts on that movie.
Polarizing.
It's a polarizing movie, yeah. Surprising, because it made a lot of money.
Yeah.
Considering it made a lot of money.
The people who didn't like it still saw it twice. You
know that's
what I mean?
A good point. That's a good point.
So.
But anyways, guys, we're going to be reading those comments first. So, yeah, stay tuned.
Whoop.
Let's start here. And go to this comment that says, Jordan Clark says, first time I watched you guys, and I have to say, this was great. And the real is just like RB3 promised up top.
Yeah.
Dude, we honestly appreciate you guys. We appreciate anyone who's new, anyone who's just finding us for the first time. We love your guys' comments. We love reading your comments. We read them. Even if we don't read them all on the show, we still read them anyways, even if they're negative. We appreciate every one of you guys, and we thank you for watching us all year, because by the time our next episode is going to be on the new year.
Yeah, the new year.
Yeah.
Literally January 2nd.
Yeah. This is crazy, man.
Yeah.
We've been at it for a while, but it's the realist, RB3, just like you said.
Hey, man. 14, 15 episodes deep. That's what's up.
This comment is by John Paul Marchand. It says, Leia didn't fly like Superman. She was in space, floating. You just need a little nudge to move in space. People who say she is flying need to go back to school and read a book. Well, guess what? She did a Superman pose, and she was floating towards the spaceship with her arm out, literally just like Superman.
Well, also,
it's kind of flying like Superman.
Listen, and there's also...
and trust me, we go to school. So.
And there's a real contradiction here, even within the logic of the film, right? Because in the movie... What Luke explains to Rey in terms of what the Force is, he says it's the energy between objects, right? The tension and energy between objects. Leia's in space. Space is an empty void.
Well, I can argue with you on that, bro. Because the Force isn't just the space between objects. I mean, that's an explanation of it that you can give. But the Force that... What made Leia experience that was the Force initially that made her a Skywalker, if that makes any sense. Like, basically, it's like, it's the Force inside Leia that exerted itself.
Right, but I thought the whole idea of the Force is taking what's around you. But
space, it's not necessarily like, well, there's nothing in space. That means the Force isn't there. The Force is literally everywhere. The Force is the Force. It's life everywhere. It's difficult to explain, obviously, because it's partly magical and it's partly like religious, right?
Yeah.
But it's supposed to be kind of like magic in a sense, where it's an entity that you can tap into if you're tapped into it, and who's more tapped into it than a Skywalker. That's why I was okay with the scene. It does look a little corny, but I was okay with it because I was like, yeah, she's a Skywalker. She's jacked up with the Force. She's like roided up with the Force because she's a Skywalker. If it was anyone else, I would have been not cool.
You don't really see her use the Force anytime before that.
True.
Scene.
But they do hint at it in Return of the Jedi, and they do a ton of it as far as in the expanded universe as well, and in everything else in canon with the books. I'm just saying, like, Leia was going to be trained as well. Like even Yoda said it in the last movie. Like, she's strong with the Force. I'm cool with it. I'm totally cool with that.
Give me the movies. I don't want books. Give me movies.
Web Bandit says, I'm with you guys. All I cared for was Kylo and Rey. Everything else was meh. Yeah, pretty much. I kind of just cared for Kylo and Rey. And Luke and Yoda were cool, but it was there for that was a 2-minute scene. I wanted more of like Luke and Yoda. But Kylo and Rey is the only thing that kept me interested.
Well, you really can split the movie into two, like with Luke, Leia, Kylo, Yoda. That's all one movie, and then the other movie is the rest of the Poe, Finn, Rose, Hondo. Hondo, is that her name? Whatever.
Yeah, Hondo.
Fucking stupid. So, whatever. Don't like that half of it, but the other half is really incredible.
Yeah. Let's
have any like Rian Johnson questions?
Yeah.
Everybody's commenting about Star Wars, but I'd love to see somebody who enjoyed the Rian Johnson discussion.
Laura, who always watches and comments, appreciate you, Laura, says, I saw Brick, Hesher, and Mysterious Squint in quick succession years ago, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt became one of my favorite actors. I haven't seen a run like that from him since. I'd like to see him in more films. Yeah, JGL's he's great in Looper too. Like, he's great in Brick, but I forget how good he is in Looper.
Yeah,
because he's a great actor, man. Like he's a favorite of a lot of people because he's 500 Days of Summer guy, quirky musical guy who likes to dance and sing and hang out with Zooey Deschanel. Yeah. But he really is, like, besides all that quirkiness of him, he's still like a really good dramatic actor as well. And
Inception too. Inception.
He's great in Inception.
And did you see that Oliver Stone one he just did with?
I did. I totally did.
Edward Snowden.
Yeah. I totally saw Snowden. Yeah.
He was good in that. Like he was really good in that. Yeah.
He did the whole Rubik's Cube solving with one hand.
Yeah.
Even though it was probably CG. Because my friend who's like a Rubik's Cube nut, which is kind of crazy, but he is. He's like, dude, I've tried that. I can't do it.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy. I mean, with Joseph Gordon-Levitt in particular, like every role he takes, he actually learns what he needs to learn. Like,
he did learn how to solve the Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
He said that.
And even 500 Days of Summer, he really learned how to sing. For Inception, I guess he really learned how to, like, because there were scenes where he's shooting guns, so I guess that was the first time he ever been like weapons trained. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of interesting stuff he learns just from doing these different. He's learned how to speak French for Looper, and then he actually speaks French. And that one where he does the tightrope thing or whatever.
I was gonna say
walk.
The walk.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah, he was great in that too. He had a long string of flops that kind of led him to not doing a lot of movies anymore, which is really unfortunate. But,
yeah.
I really wish he come back and do. He also has that TV show that he created and works on too. So
yeah, and he's also friends with like Rogan. He did that Christmas movie with him.
Oh, the night before. Yeah. That's
I didn't see it, but I heard it wasn't that bad. I've heard mixed things.
I'm not gonna lie, man. That's one of my favorite Christmas movies.
There you go.
I'm not gonna lie.
I heard some people say that. Yeah, I heard Michael Shannon's great in that.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, another Michael Shannon.
And my homie's Michael Shannon, dude. I love Michael Shannon. This one's just a comment. I'm gonna read it anyways, but it says MVR says on first quick look, I thought this was about podcasting. I would suggest dropping the word podcast and just call it meaning of, aka like the social network. I would just drop the duh, just like Facebook. Yeah, drop the duh.
Yeah.
And then, turns out he was right. Yeah. Justin Timberlake was right, or who he plays in the movie, Parker.
Yeah.
I actually had a friend told me that when I told him the name of my podcast. He's like, "Oh man, I want to listen to your podcast. What's it called?" I'm like, "It's called The Meaning of Podcast." And he's like, "Why?"
Yeah.
I like our title. I kind of like it, but it's grown on me.
We be a little transparent. That was the original idea, just to do the meaning of whoever.
But I think he meant like the meaning of versus meaning of.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like dropping the
sense. Oh, okay. Then yeah. I do think though that when we have, there's another podcast out now that has a similar title that from a channel that we're both fans of, which is fine, But, just know our show. Our show. The meaning of SK Plus, where
we talk about directors.
Right, directors, not specific movies. But Wisecrack is one of my favorite channels ever.
I love Wisecrack. Yeah. I think they're badass. But anyways, guys, let's get down to what we're all here for. I hope you had a great Christmas because we're talking all about Steven Spielberg.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said before, one of the greatest directors of all time. Later on, I'm probably going to ask you where you put him, where you rank him, if you even put him in the Mount Rushmore for you personally, as far as like greatest 4 directors of all time, greatest 5, greatest 10, greatest 20. But for a lot of people, he's the greatest because he's able to jump genres so successfully and do it in such a compelling and original way, as far as making really gritty dramas that will win so many Academy Awards and then jump to an enormous blockbuster that'll make millions and millions and $1 billion.
And still win Academy Awards.
Academy Awards. And he's the type of director who can get performances out of actors and make great visuals at the same time. Because there's certain directors that are known for just working with actors, and that's kind of it. And he's the type of director who can work with actors, work with cinematographers, work with composers, work with editors, work with pretty much everyone in pre, post, and during production. Even promotional material, even media and stuff. He's great with interviews. He's great with the media. He's great, and his PR team is great. Like, he's really, like, phenomenal. Like, this guy, he's built like an empire for himself, basically.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
But we're breaking it down what made him a star, and that is his sci-fi, fantasy, kind of fiction type movies that made him a household name, and that made him one of the most famous, if not the most famous director of all time. And I'm pretty sure that first movie that did that was what many people consider to be the first ever blockbuster, and that's Jaws.
Oh, yeah.
Jaws is crazy, man, because Jaws is one of those films that the production of it was so insane. Like shooting on a boat, and how difficult that is.
Yeah.
Because when you're shooting in the middle of the ocean on a boat, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard shooting in the studio,
Right.
much less on a boat when you don't know anything about the tide, the waves, the weather is crappy out in the ocean. Like, I'm not an ocean guy, but I know that that's a difficult thing.
Right.
And if you read about the production of Jaws, it's notoriously like Steven Spielberg was like, dude, if I finish this, I'll be happy. Like, he was just like ready to just be like fired.
Right.
What are your thoughts on the film that kind of gave him his name and made him a star?
Right. I mean, of course, he had his background with his first feature, that was Sugarland Express, that came before. And he did some TV work before. I mean, there's a lot.
He did a lot of TV. He did
Yeah.
a lot of TV movies. He did TV episodes.
You know what's funny? And going to the TV thing, like, I remember watching earlier in the year, they had that big series on Joan Crawford, Joan and Betty.
That's right.
Betty and Joan. That's
in
what it
FX,
was.
right?
Yeah. And I remember watching that show. I was a big fan of that show. My only one thing, though, I kind of did wish they brought it all the way to the point where Joan Crawford actually met Steven Spielberg, because Spielberg, the first thing he ever directed was a TV episode of the show she was on or whatever. And I remember reading stories like years ago when he met Joan Crawford. Like, Joan Crawford hated him. Like, she hated him. And that was
for a lot of reasons.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, him being so young, him being so eccentric, her being
Yeah.
such a veteran actress.
Yeah.
It's like, who do you think you are, kid? Like, I'm freaking Joan.
Yeah,
Like,
well,
she was...
Yeah, he's 20 and she is. I mean, she's at the end of her.
Experienced.
Yeah, but she's at the end of her career too,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's what you see a lot in the TV show. The thematic point of that is how these aging actresses don't get the same chances or don't get the same amount of respect as, like, you know, younger actresses or whatever. So when she was so mad at Spielberg, she literally went to the head of the studio and was like, "I'm going to quit this show if you don't fire this guy right now." And then in the end, the studio was just like, "No, we have faith in Spielberg. You're gonna do what he says." You know what I mean? And it's only for a week of work, so
Yeah.
just coming out of the gate, he already had a hard time. You know
Sure.
what I mean? So coming in, and you know, he had some success in television. Sugarland Express, like we said, was a good film.
Good enough to give him a budget for Jaws.
Exactly. And he had the relationship with Universal already. So then when he goes in and does Jaws, they give him this budget. It's based on a book that's kind of pulpy. You know, it was a big seller, but it was known to be like a cheesy kind of book. That was almost seen as unadaptable because, like you said, the whole thing is set on a boat. And for, you know, that's kind of the number one thing they teach you with filmmaking is, like, don't use water, don't use animals, don't use children, right? And Spielberg was kind of doing like two of those three big things.
He does all those.
Yeah.
He does all those real well.
Yeah, in all of his movies, but especially in this, they had to create the animatronic shark. The basic story is that, you know, a shark is invading this little town where, you know, this beach is out for the summer vacation, so all the tourists are migrating to that area. The shark is coming, killing off tourists and people who live there, but it's like a big conflict because, you know, the mayor wants to keep the beach open, but, you know, people are in danger. So a crew of fishermen and the main character, who I can't remember his name for the life of me right now, but Brody, right? That's his name?
I think so, yeah.
They all go, anyway, they all go as a crew out to the middle of the ocean and try and hunt down and find this shark, you know, on their own. You know, they're kind of all it's volunteer work, essentially.
Sure.
So what's interesting about this movie is that coming out of the gate with such a heavy-handed directorial style. The film opens underwater with the shark, with an underwater shot from the POV of a shark. That's the immediate, at the time, you never got the POV of the villain in the mainstream movie. Mm-hmm. That's how the movie opens. Mm-hmm. So what's at stake all the way from the gate, and the suspense just mounts from the very second. And he continues to build that throughout the movie, which, a lot of people, this is kind of Spielberg's one of his first. A lot of people consider this one of his best. I don't know. It's
crazy because it's kind of like a horror movie, right?
Yeah,
in the sense
it really is.
It kind of is a horror movie.
Back then, it was considered a horror movie.
Think about it. It's kind of a slasher film, and it's all about any kind of film like that, any kind of horror movie. It's all about building tension and making you feel so tense and so freaked out and in fear of getting eaten by a shark, or seeing a person getting eaten by a shark, right? Creating tension in a film is something that is actually incredibly difficult to do. Mm-hmm. That to me is what sells you on a good horror movie or a good thriller, is creating tension. Mm-hmm. And the fact that right out the gate with Jaws, Steven Spielberg nailed that visually, emotionally, musically, with working with John Williams and creating probably one of the most iconic scores of all time with the Jaws dun 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 dun.
Right.
Like that's I know that, right? I watched Jaws when I was a kid, and this movie came out way before, I was, this wasn't like a child. It came out when I was a kid. No, it didn't. It came out way before that.
Right.
So watching this movie for me as a kid, it freaked the living crap out of me because of the tension, because of creating that kind of horror feel that Steven Spielberg nailed. And it's crazy because think about it, his first successful movie was a horror movie, and that kind of goes to show what we see now with people like James Wan, people like Jordan Peele, people who are starting out with horror and kind of like
James Cameron
and using that as like a career launcher. And that's what Steven Spielberg did too. And if you can do a good horror movie, you can do a good movie. And it's crazy because visually he captures that so well too. I mean, the shots in this film are crazy.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the first demonstration of how he uses the camera to navigate us through, like you said, the tension and suspense. And he learned that, obviously, from a person who he took a lot of influence from, which Hitchcock. Right? Hitchcock is a dude who worked on the Universal lot a lot, which, Steven Spielberg used to hang out around. And just being an overall fan, I mean, growing up during that time, Hitchcock was the big name, the big filmmaking name. So then a lot of directors were kind of looking at Hitchcock and getting influence from that kind of level of storytelling in terms of using, and you can even see it in the long takes that Spielberg does, whether it's in the office and the camera just kind of moves throughout the room as they're talking. Like, that's very much Hitchcockian, like blocking, setup, scene structure, and all that stuff. And he takes that influence and incorporates it into this kind of sci-fi, not really sci-fi, but like you said, horror thriller, suspense film with the shark. And I think what adds an extra layer to it is that, and we see this in a lot of Spielberg's films that we're going to talk about later, there's not really a human villain. You know what I mean? Where the mayor's kind of a dick, and he's kind of holding people down, but the real villain here is just nature. Man versus nature, essentially. And it's kind of reflective of the struggles they were having during the production, because the shark kept shutting down, kept breaking down, kept doing messing up. They were set way over budget, way over schedule, and that's why when you see the end result, you barely see the shark at all.
It's crazy because for me, being on set and learning about what a director does, it really just changed. You've been on set a few times as well.
Yeah.
It really changes your perspective as far as the kind of respect you give a director, because a director, it's establishing an entire vision, everything going on in your head is basically what the job of a director is, right? Imagine someone who's a construction guy, and you have to build a house, and they give you all these incredible tools to do it. And it's imagining that, but you're building a world, a planet, something that is going to immerse people. And the fact that he was able to adapt to so many failures, right? Because like you said, the shark wasn't working, so he had to figure out a way to make people fear the shark without showing the shark.
Right.
So he did it with a ton of different ways. He did it with tension. He did it mainly by not showing the shark, which is crazy how something that might seem like a negative thing turned out to be a positive thing. It made the movie better. It made the movie better that there wasn't enough shark in it.
Right.
Because you feel the tension of the shark showing up so much that using that, it's incredible how he was able to adapt. That to me shows his mastery. That to me shows the most potential in a director, is having the pressure of succeeding when something you need is not there anymore.
Right.
That's incredible to me.
Right. And then, and it even comes to the benefit of the film a lot of times, because even when the shark was barely used, when the shark was shown, I mean, no offense to how the shark was designed, but it kind of looks fake. But that also kind of helps, right? Like, it looks more monstrous and more like unsettling and cringy than a real shark would actually look. But then it adds to the heightened horror. It
does. It really does.
There.
And as someone who saw it as a kid, I mean, I seeing it as an adult might change your perspective initially. But as someone who first saw it as a kid, seeing a disproportionately enormous shark freaked me out more. If I saw like a normal looking shark or a regular sized shark that looked more realistic, it would have been scary, but it probably wouldn't have scared me as much as seeing like a freaking dinosaur shark that can swallow a freaking boat.
Yeah.
That scared the crap out of me. Like you said, it helps. It really does. I want to move on to his next film, but any last words on Jaws?
Nah, I mean, Jaws it obviously has cemented its place and the cultural relevance. All directors and anybody who does anything suspense always references Jaws in terms of their inspiration. Even coming down to, we talked about a couple weeks ago with the Godzilla movie that came out recently, was one of the more recent examples of they're literally just taking from Jaws and making it into a monster movie. And
it's crazy because what happened was Jaws made all this money. It made Steven Spielberg a household name. It made a blockbuster type money that studios weren't used to seeing back in that time.
Oh, without a doubt.
So much so that everyone was anticipating his follow-up to Jaws. And a lot of people weren't sure if he was going to deliver. There was already a lot of naysayers of Steven Spielberg back in the day. But instead, what we got was Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Right.
Which, again, some people consider to be Steven Spielberg's greatest film of all time.
Right.
Because this movie blew people away. It blew people's minds. And it's crazy because he had this... He's called this one of his most personal films because he had this in mind for years. And he actually made a film when he was younger, I think called Fireflight or Firefly. I'm not sure what it was called. But
right.
He made it when he was younger, and I think it was like a short. But it's basically the same premise and the same concept as far as like what it is meeting these, beings from another place, another... outer space, something that is so it pushes the limits of human understanding.
Right.
And Close Encounters of a Third Kind is we just had the anniversary this year,
40
right?
year, 40-year anniversary.
40-year anniversary of this movie, man. And
Still
they re-released it. I know because a lot of friends went to see it. But what does this movie mean to you as far as like on a scale of filmmaking?
I mean, to me, this is my favorite Spielberg movie too. To me, this is encompassing all of what Spielberg does great, where it comes from the camera work to the casting. I mean, Richard Dreyfuss in this movie is doing something like next level to me, where he's playing at so many levels of complexity, where he's grappling with this hard time relating to his family and connecting with the people around him, but he's just struck with like this vision of these UFOs, and he's driven and motivated to just pursue that, and that's his only thing. It comes into an obsession, almost to a level of insanity. So he's playing off the charts. I just think the whole film, just from a filmmaking standpoint, again, is another movie without a human villain, right? The French dude is a little bit, again, he's a dick, but he has a reason why he wants to be there. He's looking for like missing people. He wants to figure out what this situation is, and ultimately that's revealed at the end. But again, every character has their own perspective to it, and just the sense of mystery and wonder and the way he places music in this movie, the way the themes come back in certain areas and certain times. I mean, is really, to me, it's the most subtle like John Williams score that you're ever gonna hear, because just like the notes are repeated in such a way that from one scene, it's a big operatic moment, but it'll just be quietly played down on like a piano or a light violin real later. And you have to really catch it to figure. So, because I remember doing this project my freshman year of college, watching this movie, and for my music and film class, we literally had to break down how the music was placed in this movie. And again, you talk about it being the most personal movie of his. This is happening during a time where his parents were going through a divorce, if I'm not mistaken. So the whole idea of the broken family was a big personal thing. With the whole ship, the alien ship is, you know, kind of an embodiment of both of his parents in a way, because his mother was a musician, his father was an engineer, so a computer engineer. So like that mixed together was what we got the means of communication through the alien ship. And there's just so many like great like
themes that run through the movie.
Exactly.
Absolutely. I mean, it's also like it's a guy who is obsessed with aliens, and he's kind of an alien himself as far as like alienating his family, becoming so obsessed that his own family doesn't recognize him.
Right.
His own family is scared of him because they see him as another. They see him as something they can't understand. They can't understand what he's going through. They can't understand him, and how completely depressing and how disturbing that is for him, right? As a father, as a man, to alienate your family, your children, not just your wife, but your children too. That's hard, man. That's hardcore. Like, that's real personal, like you said before. And like you said, Steven Spielberg works with that because this is one of his first films, and he does it for a lot of other films that he works with the family dynamic, because he takes from his own family and the own experience he had with his own dad and with his own mom, like you said before. And that to me is probably the biggest credit to him in this movie, the fact that it's such an interesting concept when what happens when your own family doesn't recognize you, and how does that make you feel? How does that make them feel? And the mind of a child trying to comprehend what a father is going through in this moment that is so like bigger than humanity, bigger than life, is incredible, right? Because you can't comprehend it because it literally has never happened before. We've never had aliens visit us. So the fact that his dad is experiencing that is it's incredible. It's an incredible film.
Yeah, and then of course it's also like a metaphor for like the artistic struggle, right? Like the dad's an artist. He's just stricken with like this vision that hits him, and he has to be motivated to pursuing it, no matter if he has to lose his family or whatever. But in the end, he ends up succeeding and actually getting to go on the ship with these creatures, which I just thought was really great. And of course, you kind of see the influences, right? The 2001 in terms of the visual effects. But even, he went as far as to cast Francis Truffaut in this movie as the French bad guy. Francis Truffaut is one of the big French New Wave directors who was prominent at that time, especially for film school kids like Spielberg. So casting like his favorite director in the movie just kind of shows you like that's where the whole family dynamic thing comes from, right? If you watch any Truffaut film, especially with something like the 400 Blows, the whole family dynamic, particularly with the relationship between the kids and the mothers and the fathers, is very contentious and very upfront. I mean, he kind of makes the kids really annoying in this movie, so you're kind of almost like you kind of want this guy to get away from him. You know what I mean? Because that whole thing in the beginning, like where they're just all yelling and screaming, and and you're not really sure where. If he's content with his own life. So when he makes the decision to kind of leave his home, and there's also the side characters too. I mean, there's the chick who has the little kid, and she's seeing all this for the first time, but her story is more of like a sideline story in the grand total of things. But again, it's all like reinforcing like the thematic line that's happening throughout it.
Sure, and then obviously this is another example of Steven Spielberg doing awe. Is like he's an amazing director who he really milks a scene of just experiencing something so amazing and so bigger than humanity, bigger than comprehension of the human brain, and he's so good at doing that visually, musically, emotionally, just experiencing something in awe, right? That he does that so well in this movie too, because obviously you see the lights and you see everything enormous and bigger than life is really what Steven Spielberg is known for. Bigger than life, like Jaws, Jurassic Park, this one. It's all just enormous, beyond comprehension kind of things that humanity experiences, and that's beautiful, right? That's amazing, and that's difficult to do.
Right.
Any last thing on?
Yeah, I mean, this is my, like I said, my favorite Spielberg movie. Only thing I do kind of wish that they didn't do in this movie is actually show the alien, because out of all the things, everything holds up in this movie, from the music to the effects. The alien doesn't really hold up. That it looks really cheesy.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been more powerful if this dude was just wandering into the unknown as he steps upon this ship.
Sure.
Like, we don't know. I mean, there's a whole theory out there, which is kind of debunked by the film itself and the director's cut, where they actually go inside the ship. But there's a whole theory that it's actually, the ship's not an alien ship, it's from an alternate dimension. And the reason why everybody's bugging out about it is because it feels so familiar, because it's literally from like a parallel universe or whatever. So I thought that would have been fascinating, but
Don't get me started on alternate dimensions.
yeah, you're into that.
Dimensional theories, man. I'm into
Yeah,
that stuff.
yeah.
Because as far as traveling into, never mind. When it comes to alien life forms, and the most logical form of explanation is dimensional travel, but that's a whole like
right. That's a podcast.
that's a podcast within itself. Let's
Yeah.
jump over to something that you guys might disagree with as far as us including it in this list, but we're going to anyways, and that's 1941. Again, it's in a historical film, but to me, we're focusing more on genre, and this is a comedy.
It's a comedy.
It, for all intents and purposes, is a comedy. The type of drama, historical stuff that we're going to talk about on the next episode is just that, dramatic historical stuff, not necessarily a spoof movie, which is kind of what this is. It's a spoof movie, and it actually is what a lot of people consider to be Steven Spielberg's first hiccup.
Oh, yeah.
Not necessarily like a failure, but a hiccup, as far as like, you know, you have Sugarland Express, you have Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1941. It's like, compared to those films, this is kind of like, it's all right. It's not great.
Right.
A lot of critics didn't like it a lot.
Yeah, a lot of people consider it to be his worst.
It's kind of cheesy in a lot of the I mean, it's Steven Spielberg's humor on screen, and that's just who he is. He's a very eccentric guy. He's a very like funny, goofy guy, and he likes goofy humor. And that's kind of what we got in this movie. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I just always thought of it as like Three Stooges with explosions, right?
It kind of is.
Yeah. And
it's kind of goofy.
It is. And then, you know, it's very controversial in the way it portrays like soldiers and the military and all that stuff. I mean, I even know like John Wayne went as far as to like call John Belushi and was like, don't do this movie. Like, what, you're going to kill your career?
Sure.
But John Wayne, as we know now, is completely insane. So, you know, whatever. But now it's like, it's just crazy that 1941 is something that he was very passionate about. He really wanted to get this made. Spielberg did. And
a lot of it was to challenge himself, too, to do a comedy, too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I mean, it paid off to an extent, but it also... You know, he was also paying homage to like those old time war movies that he was always a big fan of.
He loves like the whole World War II thing. He freaking loves it. Like,
right.
He loves it.
Right. I mean, and especially when you're growing up the age that he was, when you're just seeing a lot of that on TV and all that stuff. And then, at this point, you know, I believe this came out in 1980 or 1979. Something like that, but
yeah, 79.
But it's also, I mean, a lot of people were also afflicted by it because it was also coming right off the heels of Vietnam, which is a war that everybody took really seriously. So it, you know, again, it might have been, you know, good film, bad timing, but I don't know. I don't know if it's. I mean, I don't consider it like his. I don't know if it's. Spielberg's worst is better than like a lot of people's like best, you know what I mean? So
yeah, I don't think, I might say something that's a lot of people might disagree with me, but I don't think comedy is Steven Spielberg's forte. Like I
don't disagree with that.
I think doing an entire movie in your sense of humor is something very difficult to do, especially with someone who has so heavy control of the films he does. Because Steven Spielberg is the kind of guy who gets probably like final say on pretty much everything.
Yeah, especially at this point.
Especially
After
at this
Jaws
point.
And
yeah, I mean, you've made so much money. You're Steven Spielberg at this point. Everyone knows who you are. So that might have hurt him in this sense, you know, as far as being comedic and stuff like that. But speaking of that, funny I mentioned that because guess what? Another movie that came out right after that, which a lot of people were anticipating,
also
comes from the mind of Mr. George Lucas, a buddy of Steven Spielberg, who said, I have an idea of this movie about this, you know, archaeologist guys who finds artifacts from the Old Testament. And That is Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Also World War II set. Both World War II movies.
Also World War II set. Also from that era and coming from Harrison Ford.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is from the mind of George Lucas, which to me is something that should be spoken about a lot more.
Right.
Because of the relationship that Steven had with George. And obviously he had a relationship with a lot of directors, as we saw in that documentary
the
that
Spielberg
came out.
documentary on HBO. Yeah. I mean, they're all coming up in the same. George Lucas is going to USC. Francis Ford Coppola was at UCLA. Spielberg would just hang around at USC apparently. Like he didn't get in, but
he didn't even go to school there.
Yeah, he literally comes to visit USC like every year. I'm like, dude, you didn't even go here. You donate so much money to us. Anyway, I'm happy about it. Love you so much. Fight on, baby. Anyway, so he does. So he was big friends with a lot of these people.
And Steven loved this idea, and he said, let's do it. And this movie came out, and it crushed. Yeah. And it was it's Raiders of the Lost Ark, man. It's Indiana Jones. This thing is like what many people consider to be one of the best adventure fun films of all time. Yeah. Like this was a big step forward, especially following after 1941. And it's such a movie that's drenched in nostalgia and drenched in a lot of people's favorite films watching as a kid.
Like the 1930s swashbucklers, like.
And you know what's funny?
Films,
it's very over the top.
Yeah.
Rewatch this movie, man. This thing is like, Indiana Jones kicking ass. And I'm like, kind of. Yeah. It's more like goofy than anything else. But that's because it's George Lucas. And Steven Spielberg, where we just talked about comedy. Not necessarily being Steven's forte and maybe not necessarily being George's forte either.
Right.
But it works in this movie because Harrison Ford sells it so well. And it's the kind of over-the-top humor that it works in this movie. And it works for me. And I don't know if it works for you, but to me, this movie works as a whole with the mixture of the period piece, with the mixture of the comedy, with the mixture of the premise itself is actually kind of badass if you think about it. What do you think about this movie, man? What does it mean to you as far as like Steven Spielberg films?
Well, I mean, I came into the franchise of Indiana Jones a little bit different. My first introduction was actually Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That was actually my first.
No freaking way.
Yeah, Indiana Jones movie.
My dad, I know I'm interrupting you, but my dad was a massive Indiana Jones fan. I grew up with these movies in a true sense because my dad was a fan of it. And he wanted to basically make us fans of it. Like he loved these movies. He thought they were just a fun, good time movie. So I grew up with these films. So I'm shocked that this is something we're differing on right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, so like, but again, when you're a kid, like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is actually a really fun movie.
There you go.
Like, you go back and you watch a lot of these, and you're like, oh, I get where this is going, and I love this.
Yeah.
And I think it's also fair to say that Spielberg was aiming to make like his own version of James Bond, and Lucas as well. And Lucas was also involved in Star Wars at the time. So again, another movie franchise that takes a lot from the old school serials and pieces that it's taken from. So here, with the mixture of a George Lucas idea and premise and script with the direction of Steven Spielberg, again, one of the masters in camera work and building suspense. I mean, that whole opening sequence, like when he's on, just the whole opening sequence, like when he gets into the jungle and with him and his partner, and then they're going through the maze or whatever, or is that a maze, or I don't know, whatever, the cave, and he gets the gold thing. I mean, that's iconic. Like that's even still one of the most iconic images.
Yeah, one of the most recreated images.
Right, and then the boulder tumbling as he's running, and him running from all the natives as he's like trying to hop on the plane. Like that is really a great sequence, and it just gets you right into the tone of the movie. Right, it's going to be a little fun. It's going to be a little comedy, a little funny, but it's also going to be heightened in tension and
action.
A lot of action. Yeah. So it delivers on a lot of that. Now, my question to you is, I know the big criticism for Raiders of the Lost Ark is that if you take out Indiana Jones out of this movie, all the events still happen relatively the same way, right? Like, because he never really motivates the plot. He's just kind of riding along with it.
Sure, but I think that's part of the charm of the movie. I think it's having a character that you can kind of join in on, as far as like having like a friend on this adventure. It's Indiana Jones going on an adventure. It's not necessarily Indiana Jones's adventure, if that makes any sense. It's him experiencing all these events. It's him going through them. So for me, I think it works because of Harrison Ford nailing every moment and nailing the charm of the character and nailing the intention and effort behind him. I think he's one of the most... He's a lot of people's favorite movie characters of all time because of that. Because he's so... charismatic and so able to carry a film in so many different ways. And it's cool having the different... I think his background's really cool. I think it's really cool how he's able to have different expertise in different types of things. It makes him, like you said, kind of like a weird American version of a James Bond. It's kind of like a throwback kind of James Bond type American version of that.
Right, and then I think Harrison Ford really understood the character really well because that whole scene where... the legendary scene where the sword fighter is coming up to him and wants the big fight. Yeah. Just pulls out the gun and shoots him.
My dad loves that scene. That's
my dad likes. Yeah. Well, you know the whole story behind that. Yep. Yeah, Harrison Ford was sick, and then he was just like, I don't want to do this. He just it
was gonna be a big fight scene.
Yeah. He just suggested can I just shoot him? And it fits so perfectly with the character.
That's another testament to Steven Spielberg in adapting, right? Just like the shark, it wasn't able to work. He made it better, and now that scene wasn't able to work. He made it better.
Right. And then we learned more about Indiana Jones through his other films, Temple of Doom and The Last Crusade, of course. Temple of Doom is actually a prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark.
But I think a lot has to be said about, obviously, George Lucas's obsession with Nazis and Nazi themes and making the villain of pretty much every film that he goes through. But
I mean, there's not this one has more of a surface villain. But again, he's not really motivated. The real overarching theme is just Nazis are being Nazis. You know what I mean? They're just kind of taking stuff that doesn't belong to them. They're taking artifacts and trying to tamper and all that stuff. And it's Indiana Jones not really caring that much about that, but he's only really interested in saving his love interest. Her name's Karen, right?
Don't ask me.
All right,
she's a love interest.
Yeah, love interest. There you go. So that's kind of the centerpiece of this movie is trying to keep is the idea of survival.
You know what I think? What I like most about one of the things that I most like about this movie is the setting. Just having that setting, having that outfit, having that kind of world is so visually interesting, right? It's like Lawrence of Arabia, seeing the desert type setting, seeing the guy in an unknown setting that he's not necessarily accustomed to is really cool. It works really well, and it's one of those things that's probably kind of why I like the Mummy movies also that came out in 1999. I was 8 years old when Brendan Fraser's Mummy movies came out, and it had a throwback Indiana Jones type rip-off feel, right? That's kind of why I liked it, because it was these guys, going through artifacts, exploring Egypt, the mystery of Egypt and all that. That's cool for the Mummy movies, and that's kind of why I like this movie too, because it's that feel, that setting that makes it work so well for me.
Right, definitely, and the other films in this franchise kind of carry that along too. At least aesthetically, Temple of Doom does a little different. Although Temple of Doom is borderline too offensive, you know what I mean?
We'll get to that. Let's jump over to another movie that he does that kind of showcases his direction with children.
E.T., yeah.
That's E.T., yeah. E.T. is one of those films that, again, another iconic... Pretty much every one of his films is iconic, so I'm not going to say that anymore. But another one of his films that shows a different strength in his direction. Obviously, he's directing children before with Close Encounters and others, but here he really dominates kids, and he really dominates
Drew Barrymore.
Yeah, what he can do with direction as far as children, because like you said before, directing children is not easy. In fact, it's really hard. It's terribly hard and kind of difficult to do. It's notoriously difficult to do for a director. And you know what's really cool is seeing behind the scenes of this one. You saw a little bit of behind the scenes in the documentary, but it's really George Lucas really attacking a kid, really going hard at Drew Barrymore and really making her cry and stuff and making her fear and just describing things so well. There's that scene where he's just imagine this creature is attacking, and all of a sudden you see a light, and it's a scary light, but you want to go through it, but all of a sudden you're scared, and you feel really scared, and you feel really he's really good at making a kid feel like imagination is what drives a children's performance.
Right.
And he's able to get that in this movie amazingly, right?
Right. I mean, that's kind of the tough thing about directing kids, because essentially what directing is like manipulation. You're manipulating somebody, an actor, a performer. So when he's doing this, I mean, you kind of feel for Drew Barrymore's character. Well, you feel for all the characters, right?
You feel for all the kids. Yeah.
I mean, and also too it should go without saying, this is also kind of a kids movie. This is Spielberg's kind of first venture into making just a straight up kids.
A movie for kids.
Yeah, a movie for kids. Yeah, but at the same time, he holds down the adult themes that have carried on in all of his other work. I mean, this one opens up with the divorced mom, with an older brother who is very critical of Elliot, because he doesn't want to see his mom upset or disappointed whenever Elliot makes like a dumb joke or whatever. So it's like it has a very real emotional center at its heart, at its core. But then it's also very endearing to all of his characters too. You could tell that Spielberg obviously connects a lot with these kids in this movie, especially with Elliot. That's his name, right? Elliot, the main kid. Yeah, you could tell he connects with them, because just off the level of exploring E.T.'s background. I mean, it's like if you're finding a pet puppy in the middle of the woods, like. That relationship is going to grow and fester into something much more sentimental than just like a surface level friend. Like, so I think Spielberg captures that childlike innocence really, really efficiently. And, and that goes without saying, you also get a good amount of perspective from E.T., from his actual story as well. I mean, the film opens up with that sequence where he's coming out of the ship, and he's a botanist, so he's just like looking at the plants or whatever. And then but then there's that whole like incredibly scary thing when the ship leaves, and then E.T.'s just kind of like left on this planet like by himself, and then like the faceless like dudes, like literally you don't see their face. It's just all silhouettes of just people trying to hunt down this thing. It's like really scary and suspenseful. So you get the fear, you get from right off the back, you get empathy for E.T., and then you get further empathy for Elliot. So when their stories collide, it becomes they're completing each other. They're finding that hole that's been missing within each other for a long time. So I just think that Spielberg does that, and connecting those themes really great and really efficiently. So.
Yeah, it's making a kid audience feel for a kid and feel for an alien, or basically an animatronic, right? Because that's what it was.
Yeah.
It's also the connection with practical effects and making basically a compelling character out of basically a puppet or an animatronic is difficult to do as well. And nailing that is what Steven Spielberg basically did in this movie. And having kids believe that is the most essential thing, because like you said before, it's a kids movie. But what do you think of that? What do you think of like the use of practical effects and making a compelling character out of just a practical effect? Does you think he nails that, right? I mean,
right.
For the most part.
I mean, it's tough for directors to make objects that aren't human and to cut to those for objects for like reaction shots or just for general story points in general. Like, it's hard for directors to do that because it just comes off as cheesy or whatever. But Spielberg does that really well because, we open with the film from E.T.'s perspective and we close mostly from his perspective too. So, and humanizing that and putting it in the real world, that's something that also goes without mention a lot of times when discussing Spielberg movies, right? A lot of his movies are set on Earth. Like, there's not alien worlds. It's not like 2001: A Space Odyssey where they're out in space and they're on this giant, space shuttle and this machine is manipulating them. No, it's actually Earth. So you feel, you're there. And they use real products like in Close Encounters with the Baskin-Robbins truck as they sneak up to the mountain. In this one with the Reese's Pieces, obviously. So they give you like real world centerpieces to kind of connect to what's happening in this incredibly emotional and story. So I think that's the overriding theme in Spielberg's thing, right? It's like this is real life, this is the real world, this is real concept, just with a hint of extraordinary, where that's an alien coming, to down and hang out with a little kid, or if it's a giant UFO spinning the sky, or a shark, or artifacts, historical artifacts,
or something,
dinosaurs, So it's all real world, and I think that's what really That's why you have a real sense of connection with everybody in this movie,
point.
because they're very fleshed out and feel very real.
Yeah,
So,
it's great, and it really is one of those movies that, again, a lot of people connect to from their childhood initially, because they grew up watching that movie and they have like a very nostalgic feel to that movie. One last thing I want to say about it is obviously the iconic shot of Elliot going over the moon in the bicycle.
oh yeah.
That to me, and I again, a lot of people might disagree, but that to me is Steven Spielberg's first artistic creation that can live on, not just in a genre blockbuster type feel, but an actual artistic piece that people can see as an iconic shot. Not necessarily an iconic film, but an iconic shot that can give you emotions without even saying a word. A simple picture of Elliot going over the moon in that bicycle, for me, is Steven Spielberg's first, artistic venture in creating something that's absolutely iconic, that can bring in so much, like a true art piece of a shot.
Right. I mean,
I think that shot's so great because it tells you so much and it gives you so many feelings. That to me is just the centerpiece of it.
right. I mean, it also helps that they put that shot in like all the trailers and posters, and eventually became his company logo. But you're right.
And it's a poster too.
Yeah, it's supposed to.
Oh,
Yeah,
you
but,
said that.
yeah, but but you're right though. It speaks a million words without saying anything. And a lot of times this movie actually does play out more like a silent film than more of his other films, right? I mean, that whole thing in the beginning, there's no words said. That whole thing where they're riding the bikes and escaping, like there's practically no words. It's all suspense and all music. And the John Williams score for this movie lives on for forever. I mean, the da na 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 na, like that really hits. And it's also, if I was saying too, this movie is a huge influence on the way kids movies and coming of age movies became during the 80s, right? I mean, this is the first. I mean, his movies is ambient entertainment. So, and whenever we hear directors mention, I'm taking influence from Amblin, I'm taking influence from Spielberg, you see that in the old It and the new It and
in Stranger Things.
And
I mean, stuff we're seeing now that people are loving. That's getting a lot of money and a lot of attention and are well done. Yeah, you're right. They are taken from E.T.
Yeah, Earth to Echo. I mean, literally, countless of movies are literally citing E.T. and Amblin Entertainment as their influence, and this was the first one to do it. So.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Let's keep going with Indiana Jones. Let's talk about Temple of Doom, and let's talk about Last Crusade.
Temple of Doom.
These are his next two genre films. These are sequels, which is different. Because we usually don't see sequels, at least at this point in his career.
Yeah.
And these are follow-ups, because usually what he does for a follow-up is just like a new idea, a new big blockbuster idea. But these are sequels. These people want to keep seeing this character, Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with Temple of Doom, a movie that you previously mentioned.
Yeah.
And this one is, I believe it's 1984, I think it came out.
Yeah, it's probably 1984. First, this and Gremlins are literally what created the PG-13 rating.
Fun fact. There
Yeah,
you go.
yeah.
What do you think of this movie? What do you think of this adventure for Indiana Jones?
You know what? I actually think this movie is a little better than people give it credit for.
Got you.
There are some really like cool scenes. Like, I mean, it's also go without saying, you have to really be tolerant of what's happening here, right? Because there is extreme racism in this movie, like, and you kind of have to just kind of look over it to get some enjoyment out of it. But I mean, it's taking influence. The first Indiana Jones took influence from a lot of the serials, all that stuff, the Popey stuff. This takes place slightly before that. So, and Spielberg also, in the tradition that he does, he looks to previous forms of cinema for influencing his films. I mean, we even, we're going to touch on Crystal Skull a little later, but that one's more of the sci-fi for the 1950s, or the Last Crusade is more of a Western, referencing the Westerns that are coming out, during that period. This movie's more of like the exploration novels or films where they would go to like a foreign land and it'll just be like, oh, hubbity, like all in black skin or whatever. Like, that really is what he's basing that off of. And you see it, or people just paint it in like yellow, represent like Asian culture. Like that really is where he's going. And it, that's his inspiration that he's taken from. But he makes it in a really fun way, kind of like not in like a racist way, but it's still kind of racist. Like I don't know, that whole opening sequence where
it's racist, but it's funny.
yeah, it's more of like innocent racist. Like it doesn't know it's being racist. Like when that whole thing in the beginning where he it's that big dance number and they're doing that thing, and then out of nowhere like the random Chinese people just come up and they have like the weirdest camera angles. Like they're literally shot from like underneath and have like these harsh shadows, and they're just like speaking like it's like they're speaking their language, but it makes it funny. And then like when they're actually like shooting, I don't know, man, there's a lot of like questionable stuff in the whole thing when they go to India and all that stuff. But
do you feel it kind of like makes it feel like it's the white man coming to a different place that is more primitive than himself?
I mean, that's where he's taking the inspiration from, right?
Yeah,
the exploration tells of that. But you know,
it's like, look at all these crazy people.
Yeah, the fear of the other, essentially. But again, I mean, it's fun though. Like it's supposed to be fun and cheesy and over the top. So I don't really knock points off of it for that. That being said, though, this has a slightly different feel than the original Indiana Jones, right? Whereas the first one was kind of like this big operatic adventure. This one's more personal. The first one's like what would happen in this really weird adventure with Indiana Jones. This one's just like an everyday thing with Indy. So it's kind of interesting how they add him with the little Chinese or the little Asian sidekick. What's his name? Willie? No, Willie's the girl.
No, he has a
short round.
Short round.
Yeah. They put him next to it's a short round.
My buddy used to do an impression of I forget how it goes, but he's like, Mr. Jones, like the way he does it is so funny.
Where do you land on this movie? I mean,
it's definitely like it's definitely probably one of my least favorite Indiana Jones movies. I wouldn't say least favorite considering there's Crystal Skull, but
right.
I would definitely say it's a step backwards as far as the progression of where the story was going, considering we have Last Crusade that comes up. Now, what are your thoughts as far as having that as a follow-up for Last Crusade?
Well, I mean, Last Crusade is the one that incorporates Sean Connery, gives the father angle into it, and it should be said, too, when he was making Last Crusade, he was also coming more to terms with his father. I mean, we talk about the personal stuff coming into relationship with his films. A lot of the stuff you see in early Spielberg is like without a father or a really problematic, troubling father.
Mm-hmm.
This one is actually in his real life. He's actually coming and reconciling with his dad and talking to his father again. And here you see that reflected with Sean Connery coming in and incorporating that element of it. To me, Last Crusade is probably one of the more entertaining Spielberg movies. And the fact that it's not really, I wouldn't consider it the best, like in terms of the filmmaking with an Indiana Jones franchise.
Sure.
But as far as pure entertainment value, like from the action set pieces.
I mean, it's got that crazy tank thing, right? At the end. That's The Last Crusade, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's badass. Like you said, it's very entertaining.
Yeah.
It has a lot of cool action set pieces.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really good movie that you can, again, you could all, this was meant to be the conclusion of the Indiana Jones saga, essentially. Where they ride off into the sunset together. And again, it's taken a lot from the Western feel. So it's like the old rugged gunslinger who doesn't want to get back in, but he's forced back in his ways. So
can I say that I love the Sean Connery, Harrison Ford? I freaking love it.
Yeah.
I love the father and son adventure. It's something you don't see all the time, but it's so freaking cool. I love the concept of taking a son who's a badass and a dad who's a badass in his own way, obviously.
Right.
But taking them and putting them on this adventure and kind of forcing them to come together through extreme circumstances, right? That to me is so fun. I remember watching this as a kid and thinking like, man, this is cool. It's like these two guys going on an adventure and it's father and son.
Right.
That's something that to me is a cool, different dynamic in the movie. And also, I believe it's this one. Again, you guys might correct me, but I think it's this one that has one of my favorite gags of all time, which is when they think that he fall off the cliff, and they're all like mourning his death. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They're all like they're like, man, and they're just like crying, and they're like, I can't believe he died, man. I can't believe he died. And then he just comes up from behind and he's like, why are you guys crying? Like, what's going on? Who died? And it's like everyone thought he died. That is such a cheesy thing and it's so ridiculous, but it's so funny to me. Like watching that as a kid, I thought that was hysterical. And it's one of those moments that really made me laugh because I was like, they were selling that really well. And Harrison Ford, again, just kills it.
Would you rank the original Indiana Jones trilogy?
Good Lord. You know, it's funny. I really like this one. I really do. I mean, Raiders of the Lost Ark is a lot of fun, too. I might go Raiders, Last Crusade, Temple of Doom, Crystal Skull.
Crystal Skull. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the same way I rank all of these movies as well. It should go without saying. I mean, it should go with saying. You know, Raiders of the Lost Ark was nominated for a lot of Academy Awards when it came out. Like literally, like Best Director, Best Screenplay, like all these different Oscars that I was nominated for. Of course, it was the first in the franchise, so it warranted a lot of that. The other two weren't. But I do think Last Crusade should have gotten a little more credit for what they were going for.
Yeah.
Particularly with the way the story wrapped up. It was really heartfelt and satisfying. So,
yeah. Plus, tank fight. Always cool for a tank fight.
Right.
Anyways, let's start.
Also, sorry to cut you off, but Spielberg at this point has had multiple Academy Award nominations, right?
Spielberg at this point is like, there's nothing wrong he can do.
Yeah.
He's killing it right now.
Yeah, he was nominated for Close Encounters and for Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Jaws was nominated for Best Picture. Which, if you made Jaws today, that wouldn't get nominated for Best Picture, right? But,
not even close.
But because it was such a big seminal film, and it was like the invention of the blockbuster, you know, that's a big part of it. But it's just crazy knowing that you know he's made this trilogy of films. He's really at this point he's like really just pushing 40.
It's crazy because at this point this is right before the 90s, right? I might correct myself. Yeah, it's right before the 90s. So this is at a point where Spielberg is experiencing time. And this is all, like, one of my friends, because I was talking to my friends at work who are cinephiles as well and love Steven Spielberg, and they were talking to me about eras, and it's decades, right? It's like the 70s Spielberg, the 80s Spielberg, the 90s Spielberg. Like, every era has a distinct vision, a distinct perspective, a distinct moment in his life. It's crazy because Spielberg is one of those directors that a lot of his films are so heavily influenced. I mean, obviously every director, but so heavily influenced by him. By him just either challenging himself, either being bored, either being interested in a subject. So he's like, I'm going to make a movie about that because I'm just interested in it. I'm Steven Spielberg and I can do whatever I want. So a lot of it is just him writing his own thoughts down. It's almost like a diary of the life of Steven Spielberg, and that's kind of what his films are. And jumping from that, he jumps into Hook, which is another film that a lot of people regard as a great movie, and he uses a talent like Robin Williams to create a fairy tale type story and kind of flip it on its head. Where does Hook relate to you, and how do you feel that you define Hook on a personal level?
I'll be honest, man. I only seen this movie once. Not really the biggest.
Shots fired already? No,
it's not. I don't mean to shoot shots, but it's a little cheesy. I mean, it didn't necessarily age the best out of any most other Spielberg films, right? I think part of it, unfortunately.
But this is another one, to be fair, that he's aiming towards kids.
Towards kids, yeah,
like really kids. Towards kids.
Yeah, and it leaves marks on people who saw it as children. I don't know.
It does.
I mean, Christian is a big fan of Hook, right? And that's something he grew up on. Whereas Ellis doesn't like this movie because like he just didn't grow up on it. It's not for his, it's not for his eyes or whatever, So again, this is something I saw not more recently, like when I probably saw it like in cable or something. But it's not the greatest. I mean, there are some funny moments in there, but there's not really a lot happening, I guess, coherently. I mean, I don't know. So,
you think it's a little too all over the place?
There's a lot happening.
I think what hurts it too. I mean, we just talked about how Indiana Jones can be very over the top, but this one's real over the top.
Yeah.
like the villain, he's so over the top, man. Like really over the top. But a lot of it too is Robin Williams kind of going ham pretty much and just going crazy.
I mean, he's funny.
Yeah. It's Robin Williams, right?
Yeah.
So he's naturally like a funny guy, but a lot has to be said about Robin Williams' humor, specifically how he can be very goofy and he can be very just like, you know, a lot of like comedy that's based on, you know, situational comedy and stuff that just, you know, happens to him, or insults, the famous insult scene in this movie, or stuff like that is very like over the top comedy specifically aimed at children. Like children are really
Crocodile.
like 5-year-olds will freaking dig the shit out of this.
Yeah.
Like they'll love this stuff versus like a 25-year-old guy might not.
Yeah. I mean, listen, you're talking to a dude whose first movie in theaters is Peter Pan Returns to Neverland. So
what do you think about him taking the Peter Pan fairy tale and kind of flipping it out?
I mean, it's flipped, right?
Yeah.
And then you even see an adult Peter Pan in this one, right? So it's like, oh, I mean, you know, they're definitely going for something different.
But that's kind of the theme of the movie, right? It's like, be a kid again, you know?
Exactly.
Enjoy the ridiculous stuff in life.
And to be fair, that's a lot of what Spielberg has been all in his career is adults, or it's either kids or adults rediscovering their childlike innocence. You know what I mean? So it's a theme that runs consistent throughout his film. So I can see why it makes a lot of sense that he makes it. But I mean, not even Spielberg really likes this movie, man.
I think it comes back to 1941, and it comes back to Steven Spielberg's type of humor.
Right.
Where he's kind of like an adult kid, where he's just like eccentric, crazy, and he's just making goofy characters, and like that's the kind of humor he likes, and that's the kind of humor he, like you said, he grew up with.
Right.
So he's the kind of guy who gets the laughs out of just the ridiculous kind of silly stuff that this movie has a ton of, which is a lot of silly stuff. But again, it has a lot of fun moments, and it's, you know, it introduces the legendary Rufio, also known as Danny Brasco, also known as Prince Zuko from Avatar, for anyone who loves that as much as I do.
Did he voice that? Or?
He voiced Prince Zuko from Avatar.
I didn't know that. Wow.
That's what I know him from. Like, for me, he can die. I can die happy knowing that I'm a fan of Donnie Brasco just based off of Avatar, dude. I'm telling you. Prince Zuko is one of my favorite all-time characters.
Yeah.
But anyways, back to this. Hook, so Hook ranks pretty low for you as far as the Spielberg spectrum.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah. I mean, it's it's no hate towards the movie. I'm sure if I watched it as a kid, it's also, I mean, even Spielberg will tell you this. I think he said in an interview, if he made it today, it will probably be received a lot better because the effects just weren't there, and because it all looks like it was just shot on a soundstage. It doesn't the production value isn't really there. If you had like modern day effects and CGI, it probably would have done a lot better. You know.
You know what this movie doesn't do though?
What's that?
It doesn't have Hugh Jackman singing Nirvana at the top of his lungs.
Is that the new Pan?
Yep.
I didn't see it.
Yep.
Was it really that bad, or?
I didn't see it either. I just saw that, and that's pretty epic.
Yeah. I want to watch that, man, just for the shits and giggles.
Hey, it has Rooney Mara. Shout out to Rooney Mara. Yeah, every podcast, I'm gonna give you a shout out.
And even though she plays a Native American.
Hey, shout out to Rooney Mara. Anyways, let's jump over to one of my all-time favorite Steven Spielberg movies, if not my favorite Steven Spielberg movie. The one that I saw as a kid too, but it's one of those that holds up. Like, it holds up as far as greatness and as far as level of complexity, combining with action adventure, combining with horror, combining with big themes. And that, my friend, is Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
Still, that score, man. I've been to the John Williams concert. I don't know if you've been. And I was begging him, like, obviously from the way in the back, but still, I was like, please play Jurassic Park theme. It makes me cry, man. It's like my childhood come to life. Like, obviously, Cody and Cops are massive Jurassic Park fans too.
Yeah,
Cody's
wedding.
Cody's wedding. They played the Jurassic Park theme when he walked down. It was I now pronounce you husband and wife. And I was like, yo, that's legit.
Yeah.
That's legit. Anyways, my friend is also a big Jurassic Park fan, and we've talked about this quite a bit, but Jurassic Park is greatness. It's greatness. It really is, because it adapts a book, which is actually a really good book, and the concept in the book is amazing, as far as humanity playing with nature in a very dangerous level. But this film, to me, expresses so many different things. First of all, rewatching it on an intellectual level, as far as what would happen if man tried to tame a beast that was never initially tamed by man, right? From a time before man, which is the dinosaur era, which is a time before man, because that's when dinosaurs ruled the world. What would happen when the intellect of man faces off with the physical, monstrous nature of dinosaurs? Nature, that's what it is, right? And that's what it's so interesting about it, is that they take the scientist, Ian Malcolm, coming in and basically telling you the chaos theory and telling you, the famous, lines and moments that he has, but he basically says, when it comes down to mankind trying to mess with something so much bigger than itself, it's bound to have negative consequences, because we're just not able to share this planet with them on a basis never intended to be, and also tame them as if they were circus animals or as if they were dogs, because that's not what they are. They're obviously dinosaurs. They're bigger than life. They're bigger than anything you've ever experienced, and they deserve not a theme park. It's basically what it is. But what can go wrong will go wrong is essentially what it breaks down to. But it's such an interesting concept because it deals with man's fascination with theme parks,
right? Exploitation,
right? With like circuses and stuff like that. Like, check out this freak of nature, and it flips it on its head as far as like that freak of nature can step on you.
right.
But that, to me, that concept is what makes this movie great. Like, everyone's like, well, the dinosaur and the raptors, and that's great too. But what makes the movie great for me is having the smart guy kind of break it down to you and tell you why this plan doesn't work and why things will pretty much always go the way they go in every Jurassic Park movie, which is basically shit hits the fan.
Right.
But where does this, that to me is already awesome, but where does this for you, first of all, rank? And second of all, where does this Steven Spielberg type of art land for you? Because it's obviously a blockbuster, it's obviously a genre film, but at the same time, it has a very specific artistic vision.
Right. I mean, this came out around the same year as Schindler's List, which we're going to talk about on part 2 of the Spielberg episode. But it's funny how Spielberg does that. He'll do 1 year where he'll just do both types of movies. But this movie is interesting because, like you're right, is dealing with really powerful real world themes of exploiting experimentation, science and the misuse of science and the abuse of scientific discovery. And I just think it's fascinating how we've developed this more of an understanding of dinosaurs, kind of almost because of the original Michael Crichton novel and because of this movie. I mean, after this movie came out, the like in real life, the U.S. Funding for research of I don't know how it's called, prehistoric, but it's not a specific term, but their particular research for dinosaurs actually ended up increasing. So it has real world effects. And again, the science, and we've become to discover now that dinosaurs don't really look like that. They look more like chickens. But that's fine. That's what they're going for. But it's just interesting how we're able to, how this movie is able to transcend a lot of that. And you even talk to some of the biggest engineers or scientists in the world, they are telling you they're inspired by Jurassic Park. So its monument on cinema has made its mark. Not to mention, when it came out, I believe it was one of the, if not the highest grossing movie of all time, one of the highest grossing movies of all time when it came out. Pioneer for visual effects, ILM, one of the first times we see like digital moving creatures within
fully animated creatures that move and run and have a full effect on the environment that they're in.
Right, because initially dinosaurs were either going to be puppets or miniatures, or was it like stop? They were going to be like stop animation. But then, the people at ILM were just like, what if we try doing it through the computers? And they tried it, and it really paid off. I think this movie still holds up to this day.
Holds up. That's incredible, right? I 100% agree that it still holds up. That to me is that's a feat within itself, man.
Yeah.
The fact that it can still hold up. It does hold up versus other films that we literally see this year that don't look that great in their CGI.
And I don't know if there's a hot take or not, but I kind of think this movie, from a visual effects level, it definitely looks better than fucking Jurassic World, man. I'm not gonna lie to you.
100%.
Thank you.
It killed me.
Yeah.
I was watching Jurassic World and I said to myself, how can it be that Jurassic Park came out in 1993 and it looks better than Jurassic World, which comes out in 2016?
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. Or 2015? 2015?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
Yes, dude. It pissed me off. I was like, Jurassic Park looked better. The dinosaurs look better in Jurassic Park than Jurassic World. That gets me mad, dude. That gets me mad.
You know, it's the beautiful mixture of the animatronics and the CGI. So when they have the animatronic model and they have like the lighting cues and the way that's set up, it looks a lot nicer and fresher when you go into the computer and start generating those effects because you already have the context, you have the texture, you have all that locked down. So again, I think this movie visually, and I think it's a big break for Spielberg visually too, like where he's expanding his horizons when it comes to like the epicness, the shots. I mean, that whole iconic thing where the water is just tapping like as the dinosaur's approaching. That's a real moment. Like,
that's so true. That is incredible. That's an incredible moment.
Yeah.
The rain scene, it's incredible.
Exactly.
The Rex when it comes out, that's just, it's beautiful. It's art, dude. That's freaking art. Yeah. To me, this is as equally an art piece as it is a blockbuster. It's as equally a genre film as it is just a freaking Academy Award level film. It's just that good for me. It's incredible. It's able to take themes and concepts and stuff that will make you think based on a human level, based on an intellectual level, based on a scientific level, and combine that with an action adventure horror movie. Yeah, that's beautiful.
And it's really like satirical as well, right? I mean, when they have the animation with like what was it, like a paperclip or whatever? I feel yeah.
He has a name, but I forget his name.
Yeah. But when he's doing that, I mean, that feels something right out of like an actual theme park or like the actual like computer program back in the 90s.
Well, that's what Michael Crichton does, right? Because he's also the writer of Westworld. Mm-hmm. He has this thing when humanity becomes so self-obsessed with itself and self-fascinated with, like you said, exploitation, and they have an obsession with theme parks. And Michael Crichton is obsessed with theme parks because that's basically what Westworld is about too. Right. But it's this concept of man taming something that they're not necessarily able to tame, whether that be in Westworld, androids and robots and technology that's bigger than them, or in this film, which would be nature.
Right, and then we see the exploitation theme kind of in E.T. as well, where they take E.T. and he's being like experimented on in the labs, and it's really horrifying in that. And you see it this is what, if that kind of methodology continues within the government through researchers, this is where a dinosaur attack is going to end up putting people.
It's also the corporate feel too, right? Because it becomes into the making it a capitalistic venture of scientific discovery. Yeah. Taking something that's beautiful in science and in nature and making it into, like I said, a capitalistic venture or a corporation or a product or basically something that you can buy, that you can have, that you can own, and that you can wear a T-shirt of. Right.
And it creates the iconic. I mean, it's a very high concept movie in the sense. I mean, high concept in the sense that it's very easily recognizable, right? Like as soon as you see that Jurassic Park logo, you know what it's about. My only complaint with this movie really is like the ending is really cheesy. I mean,
no complaints allowed. No, I'm kidding.
But this was a Star Wars discussion. I think the ending does get a little cheesy.
Sure. The teleporting T-Rex.
Yeah.
Shout out to Mr. Teleporting T-Rex. I see you, girl. I see you.
Yeah, just like. I thought that was a little funny, but the whole thing where they are hiding in the kitchen.
That kitchen scene's awesome, dude.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah,
that's freaking cool.
Yeah.
Those Velociraptors are badass, man.
They
instantly became like my favorite dinosaur. Yeah. Like it was one of those things. Like watching this as a kid, my brother caters to the Rex, and I catered to the Raptors. Yeah, where I'm just like Team Raptor, my brother's like Team Rex.
Right.
It's so cool, man.
Right.
I love it.
I just thought that whole big shot though, where the T-Rex does the war, and then the banners following just perfectly in front of the camera. Like, that's too Spielberg-y, for me.
Oh, that to me is fist pump.
Right. Samuel Jackson in this movie too.
Oh yeah.
I was
hold on to your butts, man.
Yeah. Jeff Goldblum. I mean, so many great actors.
Jeff Goldblum. So many iconic moments. Clever girl. Everything like that to me is like shout out to that guy. That guy's
Lord
badass. Well, I don't know that guy's name. What was his name? Pierce? I don't know. But anyways, he's a badass. Shout out to him. R.I.P.
Right.
You could have taken on the Raptor, maybe. But she was too clever of a girl. Laura Dern, freaking kicking ass in this movie, limping.
I forget
the Jello shot, freaking shaking Jello, man.
Yeah.
Never look at Jello the same way again.
Never,
dude.
And I can't remember the homeboy's name, but he was Sam Neill.
Totally. Shout out to him and Thor Ragnarok.
And Jeff Goldblum too.
And Jeff Goldblum in Thor Ragnarok. That's so true. Oh my god.
So many great. So again, this movie has birthed so much greatness coming out of it.
Greatness, dude. To me, this movie is one of the GOATs.
Yeah.
Like I'm telling you, man, it's up there as far as GOATs, man. Greatest of all time for anyone who doesn't know what GOAT is. But unfortunately, it was followed up by The Lost World.
Okay. No, I'm not gonna lie, man.
You know what's crazy? I like The Lost World.
I like The Lost World too.
Like Copster and I have talked about it too, and Copster and Cody agree. I think Copster agrees at least that The Lost World kicks ass. I think The Lost World's cool, man. Like watching The Lost World, everyone gives it crap, but I think it's badass.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people feel like it's a step down. A lot of people feel like it's not taking the big concepts like Jurassic Park did and just making it a fun, over the top, gymnastics girl fighting raptors movie.
Well, whereas the first one was more of like a science exploration, this one was more of a survival story.
Sure.
Like they have to survive the situation.
This one had a freaking Julia Moore too.
Yeah, Julia Moore, Vince Vaughn.
Vince Vaughn, who's like a serious role in this, which is kind of
this is before he turned comedy.
Yeah, this is where his comedy career, and he plays like a animal rights guy, I think is what he plays.
Yeah.
And Julianne Moore plays like a National Geographic photographer. And obviously you have Jeff Goldblum playing Ian Malcolm again.
Right.
I think this is a fun movie. It's definitely, it gets crazy when they come back to San Diego and stuff.
Yeah.
But it also has other themes, like the hunter guy trying to hunt down a dinosaur because he thinks, he's like, why do you want to hunt this thing? And he's like, because it's badass if I hunt it. Literally just hunting something so big and bigger than life that he's like, if I can kill a fucking T-Rex, I'm a badass. So he's like, is that the only reason you try to kill T-Rex? And he's like, pretty much, dude. So it kind of has those themes that we see nowadays, right? With people who hunt lions, with people who hunt rhinoceroses, with people who hunt, animals that become rare, and talk about rare when it's like the last freaking dinosaurs left because they're, dinosaurs, and that's all we got of them, right? But it's also like, the concept of creating nature. Becoming God, right? Like we can't become God. We shouldn't, declare ourselves as having the hand of God in the sense of like creating dinosaurs, something that shouldn't be created, because that's not what mankind, that's not what nature, that's not what God intended, in the sense of like something that we shouldn't deal with. Right. But I like Lost World. I think it has some fun, cool scenes. I think it has some good moments, and To me, it's a lot of fun.
Right.
And I enjoy it quite a bit. And it has cool moments too. I mean, the freaking cliff scene with the RV.
Yeah.
That thing is, you feel tension in that scene, dude. When she's on the glass and it's cracking, and then the freaking thing falls, and she's.
Right.
It's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool. I don't care what anyone says. Lost World is cool.
Yeah. But doesn't get enough credit. I agree with that.
A lot of people.
Other
don't
sequels
like
though, fucking garbage.
Let's jump over to
AI. Is that next? The next sci-fi movie. I mean, of course, there's Saving Private Ryan. Again, other half.
We'll talk about
that.
that.
Yeah.
Let's jump to AI.
AI.
It's funny because this movie, people are starting to revisit this movie and kind of give it a little bit more credit. I was talking to a couple friends of mine who were talking about revisiting this movie and giving it credit as far as high concept and as far as visually. Because to me, visually, this is one of Spielberg's best. It's an incredibly jarring visual experience as far as how crazy it is.
When you talk about, you mentioned earlier the eras of Steven Spielberg and how the different eras of his films kind of all take a different look. This is really a stark, like, defining change in how a Steven Spielberg movie looks, right? Just from the visual, from the blue hues and the really dark shadows and high contrast, and desaturated colors. Like this is, and we see this look continued in like Minority Report and War of the Worlds and all the other sci-fi movies that he makes on in this 2000s era. But this movie, I mean, of course, it's really the big collaboration between Spielberg and Kubrick, right? Arguably the two greatest directors of all time coming together. And unfortunately, Kubrick was gonna direct this movie, but he passed. So he handed over the reins to Spielberg, who was already involved on a producing level, I'm assuming. So, you know, this is a movie that I always enjoyed since I first saw it. I think this movie is a masterpiece. This is one of my favorite Spielberg movies of all time. And a lot of people really hate on it because, you know, when you're measuring it up against Kubrick expectations, you know, a lot of people start to look at it a certain type of way.
What do you feel about the child kind of POV that we get?
Yeah, it's Haley Joel Osment is the main kid, right? And he's playing. He's a artificial intelligence created. Again, another story about creation, right? Where's the line between creation and not creating? And yeah, I mean, I enjoy having it from a kid's perspective because it is like you're living in this harsh sci-fi world where this kid has no idea who his real parents are. He doesn't even have real parents. He's manufactured, but he is programmed to adapt this sense of emotion. And then where does that lead? To a family that abandons him, to now he's lost in the world as an actual looking human being. But because he's programmed with emotions, he develops into an individual character. So placing it through a child's perspective really gives it that sense of what this movie's really about, and it's really about growing up and maturing. And even if you're an AI, if you're not real, you still have the same sense of emotion and feelings and all that stuff. So I think it's a really powerful movie when you start looking deep into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for me, I think, like you said, a lot of people hate on it. We're not too super hate on it, but they don't regard it as one of the better Spielberg films.
The reason why people do that is because of the ending, essentially, right? The whole thing where the blue fairy is what brings him, grants him his wish, and he spends that last day with his mom, who's been searching for the entire time. And a lot of people think Spielberg added that ending because, you know, of course, Spielberg's a sentimentalist. Kubrick isn't. Actually, Kubrick was the one who commissioned that ending. He's the one that was his idea. That's the way he wanted to end the movie. Spielberg was just doing it.
That's a criticism that a lot of people give on Spielberg, is like the overly Disney-fied cheesiness.
Right. I mean, it's with Warren because, you know, all of his movies, he kind of removes a lot of the big stuff. I mean, we're going to talk about The Color Purple in the other episode, but he purposely kind of waters that down.
Mm-hmm.
Jaws, he kind of waters down the main, because in the book, there's a conflict of the affair and having an affair and all this stuff. He cuts that out completely.
Mm-hmm.
So his interest is not necessarily the ancillary stuff or sex or desire. It's more about the character and more about the feeling and the emotion getting behind that.
And it's more about the awe and the experience and,
exactly.
the feeling and the basically the final shot of The Last Jedi.
right.
Looking up at the stars and have a broom in your hand. But that's very Spielberg-y. It's very Spielberg-y.
Yeah, and he loves he loves giving the audience an experience and making them, and you know, all filmmaking is manipulative to a certain extent. It's just a little more obvious in his films because of the music that he puts forth and the way it's edited.
It's like he's telling you, this is how you should feel right now.
Right.
Please feel this way because I'm telling you to feel this way.
And especially considering that he was using the style of Kubrick for this movie in particular, with the overly long takes, the over heightened lighting, the weird lenses, the real short lenses that put you like right in each character's face.
Sure.
Like he's using a lot of the traditional Kubrick isms in directing it. But the reason why Kubrick does those things is because Kubrick in himself is emotionalist, right? All of his films are just like, you know, very, and that's the power of his filmmaking. Whereas Spielberg is the exact opposite of the spectrum. He's very emotional. So then when you're taking those two styles together, it doesn't gel with a lot of people, essentially.
I agree with that.
But I think this is one of his best.
I think visually it's pretty spectacular as well,
Yeah.
but we mentioned that before as far as visual. But speaking of sci-fi, we follow this up with Minority Report.
Oh, right.
Minority Report followed this movie.
Yeah.
It literally was the next Spielberg film. And this film is obviously starring Tom Cruise, and it also deals... See, I think this film is different, right? Because it deals with... It's sci-fi, very sci-fi, but it deals with an interesting premise that is so... It deals with a lot of interesting premises, but it deals with an interesting premise in itself, which is... If you could stop crime before it happens, can you do it? And is intention of crime enough a crime within itself?
Right.
As far as dealing with people who intend to do something, does that, in a sense, still make you a criminal if you still haven't committed the act of that crime?
Right. This film is so deep thematically. You could almost argue putting it in the other side of the show, right? The more dramatic side, because this movie is really hitting home on some really deep stuff. I mean, the idea of kind of not time travel, but time travel mentally. Like you're predicting what somebody's intent is going to be, what's going to happen. And the times that they don't stop it, you actually do see it come true. So you know this is fact. Like but it's all about perception too, right? And that's also the question. Like, is crime more about perception or is it more about intent? So it's a lot of different things they're going.
It's all about. It's also about. I'm assuming this is what you're saying as well, but it's also about laying the seed, right?
Right.
Does pushing someone. I forget what does this so well, but there's. Looper does this well. Does pushing someone in a certain direction make them go towards what direction you think it's going? If I think you're going to commit a crime, does that in a sense make you commit the crime more? If I think you're a criminal, right? I think you're going to do something, then you do it because I thought of it. So does that in itself spark the future? Is the future based on someone's perception of you as well? And not just the perception of yourself, but also what people perceive you to be and what people perceive you to do. Especially with Minority Report, I really wanted to talk about this anime called Psycho-Pass. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's heavily influenced by Minority Report. But it's different in the sense that it's not necessarily dealing with future, but it's really it's this society similar to Minority Report in the future with technology and all this stuff. But it's instead of the police department or the authority predicting the future, what it is they predict your mental state. So they have a system where they're able to read your mental stability, and it's predicting if you're ever going to be mentally unstable. And it's such an interesting concept because we deal now literally in a world where we're dealing with this on a very real level, as far as mass shooters, as far as people, psychopaths, psycho people, or crazy people who are taking advantage of the system, the American system that we have, and using weapons to commit mass atrocities, and they have issues in their head. So
by the way, not to cut you off, but have you seen that video of the dude, the most armed man in America?
No.
Oh, dude, watch that video, man.
Yeah.
Because it is like I think ABC did a whole special on this dude. He literally has tanks, and when you go inside this dude's house, he's literally lost his mind. Literally. To me, arrest this motherfucker, because if you watch this, search it up on YouTube, people. The most armed man in America. You watch this video and you see where it goes towards the end. You're like, whoa, lock this dude up immediately.
But it's that though. It's dealing with this anime is dealing with predicting your mental stability based on this reading that they have. And it's one of those things, right? Because in the anime, a lot of people are like, it reads you and it's like, yep, you have a 90% chance of going crazy. And you're like, dude, no, I'm totally not. I'm eccentric, man. I'm very, I'm quirky.
Right.
And it's like, no, lock him up. He's got to be locked up and then sent to rehabilitation. And they send you to rehab for doing nothing. And there's a certain level of insanity where now it's like, what comes to the point of saving grace? Is someone too far over the edge to bring him back, from going insane, right? It's trying to purify the population as far as committing atrocities and mass shootings, which is basically what Minority Report is all about. Right. It's basically stopping crime before it happens. And if you have a tool that is that powerful, is it good or is it bad? Right. Is it moral? Is it logical? Does it work within society? Does it improve society? Or does it unfairly criminalize people who might not be criminals.
And that's the whole question that Colin Farrell asked throughout this movie, right? Like when he comes in to investigate, just kind of do a checkup on the organization, to evaluate and see how efficient this program is, especially since it takes place in Washington D.C. Now you're kind of looking at, and you're kind of seeing where the flaws in the system becomes, because what if one of your guys is the one who comes up and is predicted to murder somebody?
What if you come up, which is basically the premise of the movie, right?
Yeah, right. With Tom Cruise, yeah, and again, as we learn, is really about perception, because even though there's the vision of Tom Cruise killing the one dude, when you actually watch it, that's not how it occurs.
Yeah.
Like the dude just really shot himself and got out of there. You know what I mean? So and again, so it's all about perception versus reality as well. So I think that's a really powerful thing, especially considering when, we have that great scene early on where Tom Cruise is like talking to his kid through the virtual thing, and he like all he has left is like this video collected memory of his family, but he is perceiving that to be his only reality, because that's all he could live with. And also there's also a really like subtle underlying theme of drug culture, right? Where he's hooked up on those really like crazy drugs with the dude with one eye comes out of the shadows. I love that scene, by the way. But then he ultimately becomes like sedated. That's how he sleeps. That's how he medicates himself. So when he has to become sedated under that in order to hide from the people who are searching for him with the little spider robots and stuff, and he literally just loses his eyes. It's really fascinating how that works out. So,
sure.
Again, I think there's so many like
there's another theme in the movie that like you said, there's so many themes in this movie of catered advertisements. How crazy is it? Remember that? It's quick, but it's so real. It's like it scans you and it says, "Oh, you like T-shirts? Buy this shirt. Buy this car. Oh, you like red cars? Because it knows you, because it can read you." And that's literally what we see now, dude. My Instagram can tell me who I am. It can tell me what I like. Can tell me what I'm most likely to buy based on stuff that I don't even know what Google can do at this point, because they're able to correctly predict me as a person and predict my spending. I mean, it's crazy. Think about what we're able to put into Amazon and online culture and online buying, and how they're able to basically say, you used your credit card for this, use it for this, use it for that, use it for that, and very catered advertisement, very specified towards you. And that Minority Report has a really cool scene that says that pretty much in a nutshell.
Right. And there's that, going to the real world off of that. Like, have you heard that whole theory that the iPhones are really listening to us, and like we see Facebook ads, like that's literally.
Don't get me started, bro. Yeah. I've said some weird. I've said some oddly specific stuff to my friend, and I've had a conversation about it, and then minutes later, I go on Instagram and it's on like buy this, buy that, or I go on Facebook. I'm not saying that's what the case, but I'm just saying it's happened to me so many times that it freaks me out. Like, I've gone to the corner store and bought this like a new Hershey's chocolate, and then when I come home and I'm eating the chocolate and I go on Facebook, I see an ad that says go buy it, and I'm like, how'd you know I freaking bought it? Or like, what'd you think of it? I'm like, how'd you know I literally went to buy it at a corner store? It creeps me out.
Again, another instance predicting the future, right?
It is.
That's the whole idea of consumerism and marketing, predicting what people are going to like. And again, that's just a further extension of the overall theme here, right? Prediction, and whether that prediction is true or false, or whether the people who are affected by that are going to realize that. Because whenever they arrest somebody for the crime that they're committing, like, what? I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to do it. Like, motherfucker, of course you weren't going to do it because you got caught. Like, it's just like, it's crazy how, where's that line toe? And even for me, I'm like kind of wondering, even watching this movie, is like, it is a cool system, but what if somebody does decide to change their mind at the last second? You know what I mean? Or what if somebody doesn't intend to murder somebody? It's just, I don't know. So it's
a good movie. Let's just say that.
To me, this is one of my this
one of your favorites, right?
Talking about this era of Spielberg, this is my favorite sci-fi movie that he's made. And I think overall, if we're listing all of Spielberg, this will be pretty up there too. So
good deal, man. Yeah. Let's jump over to World of Worlds, which is the next one.
Another Tom Cruise.
In another movie dealing with interesting concepts as far as like alien visiting us. not in a very happy way. These aliens aren't happy.
Yeah.
But this is another one of his films that a lot of people don't necessarily regard as being as great, right? I mean, it's like, again, and no Spielberg film is probably terrible,
Right.
but this is not as greatly recognized as Minority Report, which we just talked about, right?
Right.
But it's still an interesting movie, and it still deals with big concepts, and it has, you know, action set pieces and moments that are really, again, iconic and very Spielberg-y. What do you think of this movie, War of the Worlds, specifically?
Yeah, I mean, this movie gets a lot of bad rap. When it opened, it kind of opened to like a lot of mixed reception. Another one he did with Tom Cruise with Dakota Fanning. And it's an adaptation of the H.G. Wells story, you know, back in that time, and even, you know, Orson Welles adapting it to a radio show. And becoming a really famous movie back in the 1950s as well. So it's a very seminal piece of science fiction material that he's adapting here. And a lot of people were disappointed by the way he handled it. I thought it was great. I thought it was really fun, a fun movie, in the sense that it really captures the notion of science fiction, in the sense that the notion of like classic 1950s science fiction, I should say. Like, it's not like where the other Spielberg alien movies are like diplomatic or more friendly aliens. No, this is like aliens are here to kill you, bro. Like, they're here to just freaking annihilate you and take over the world, which is cool. I mean, you know, it really comes down to, if we're speaking on a more global, like, political level, it's really about imperialism, like colonialism, coming to a place, dominating somebody else's species without them asking. But it's also a really personal family movie too. I mean, the Tom Cruise character is a deadbeat dad who really doesn't have a good relationship with his kids, particularly with his son, and it's really the falling out of that relationship, of those relationships, that navigate throughout the story, and how he's trying to relate more to his son throughout. I mean, there's a really good scene, like, it's nothing to do with the sci-fi here, but where, like, just Tom Cruise and I forget the kid who plays his son, but they're just playing catch in the backyard, and it's like a really intense dialogue scene just with them tossing the baseball back and forth between the two of them. So it's moments like that that really sell this movie for me. Of course, another one of the big criticisms is that why did the kid just randomly walk off into war with against the aliens, and how he comes back at the end. I think both of those. I think that whole plot where that ended up going was kind of stupid, but I think the whole family dynamic in this movie was one to value. So where do you lie on?
It wasn't. I didn't think it was that great, to be honest. I feel like it's cool. I mean, it has some cool moments in it. But I remember watching this with my brother. Again, this is in an era when I can, you know, go to the theater and watch a movie and stuff. But I remember being, like, not impressed, pretty much, for the most part. Especially seeing other movies at this time. Especially seeing, like, a movie like Independence Day, something that I love personally, deal with the same concept as far as, like, you know, aliens are here to attack us and stuff. And obviously, Independence Day is very over the top, and this is not as over the top as Independence Day. But again, I feel like it's a concept that we see so many times as far as aliens attacking us and just blowing us up and stuff like that. There's also a few dumb moments that really don't hold up for me either. Yeah. But overall, like I said before, it's never bad. It's just okay. It's still a Spielberg movie.
Yeah, Spielberg's bad. Like I said before, Spielberg's bad day at the office is better than most people's. Like,
most people's good day.
Right. So it really is. On its own right, it's a decent, and there's some really cool moments, like you said, like the thing where, like, they're all driving in a van, and then it's that one long take where it's just circling around them as they're driving. Thought that was really cool. The Morgan Freeman narration at the beginning and the end was really dope. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Talk about the budget in this movie too.
Oh, big budget, yeah. Ooh. Yeah.
They threw the freaking kitchen out the window with this budget, man.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's a big adaptation. It's a big name, so they wanted to, especially with a director like Spielberg, star Tom Cruise, Dakota Fanning, who was actually at this time one of the biggest stars in Hollywood.
Being a little kid, and she's still a big star.
Yeah. Seriously, I mean, she was in the one with Denzel. She was in a couple big movies. You know, now her sister's kind of taking her place, Elle Fanning. But yeah, it's interesting how this movie kind of ended up coming together in that way. Wasn't received the best critically, but I'm just hoping that sometime down the line, maybe you'll find more of an audience. I mean, more people are coming towards it, I guess, as time develops. So.
Sure, just like AI, like a lot of people are revisiting AI. Some people might revisit this film too.
Yeah,
That's a possibility. What's interesting too is that something I do every year is Halloween Horror Nights with my friends. I love going to Halloween Horror Nights. You were going to join us, but you couldn't.
Yeah.
Freaking love going there. But they have the freaking plane scene, the plane crash thing, and they still have
awesome.
it. They still have it.
That's awesome.
So you always, every time you go to Halloween Horror Nights, you still walk by it every time, and it has nothing to do with like Freddy and Jason trying to kill you, and it's still like, what's this plane doing here? Oh, it's that scene from War of the Worlds. Every time someone like passes by it, they always explain it, and it's like, you know, at the same time, you know, Freddy and Jason are coming after you because it's Halloween Horror Nights.
Right.
I just think it's funny how it's still at Universal. It's still freaking there, man.
Like Spielberg. I mean, Universal's like Spielberg's home.
It is. It's Spielberg's like dominance, basically.
Yeah. I mean, if you even go on a studio tour, it's like you stop at Jaws, you stop at War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of things that they incorporate. They tell you the whole story of Jaws, though, behind the scenes on the tour, which a lot of studios wouldn't be open to doing. But it's a fascinating.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that Spielberg was just going ham with like all the destruction and chaos
and with budget
soldiers. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think the biggest problem with this movie, and I think why people don't connect to it, we talked about before how a lot of these movies don't really have villains. They're just more. It's more of a complex idea. That's the villain here. This one. It's kind of just like straightforward, just aliens trying to take over. You don't really get their side of the thing, so it's just you're rooting. It's more of a survival movie.
Sure.
And I think when Spielberg just goes straight survival, it disappoints a lot of people.
Yeah.
AI, not AI, but EI like Jurassic World or Jurassic Park 2 and with this. So
yeah, I would agree with that. Also, you know, if aliens did visit us, we would find out that they were all visiting Tom Cruise.
Yeah, right.
Everyone knows Tom Cruise is an alien god.
Hey.
Let's move on. Speaking of aliens, I mean, you might say that Steven Spielberg has like an interest in aliens or something. I wouldn't know. I mean, there's E.T., there's Close Encounters. Would you say he likes aliens?
He loves aliens. I mean, you know, aliens are, you know, he grew up with
That's aliens. Like his thing, dude. He's like straight up like alien life form and like all this stuff that he's talking about. Anyways, let's talk about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
Yeah, there we go.
Which is probably what we're gonna finish on because Ready Player One hasn't come out yet.
Right, well, Venture to Tintin too is.
It was Tintin. Did I forget that? Oh, that does come out.
Yeah, after.
You're totally right, and we still have the BFG, which none of us have seen.
Yeah, I haven't seen the BFG. Sorry, people.
Shout out to Mark Rylance.
Right, he's a great actor.
Yeah, I love Mark Rylance.
We'll talk about him on the other side with Bridge of Spies.
Big freaking giant.
Yeah.
Anyways, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, super cheesy, super over the top, super ridiculous. Yet you like this RB3.
Well,
Tell me why.
Again, when it's the first Indiana Jones movie you watch, you're like, okay, I'm in for it. Now watching it, I kind of see what people don't like about it. Like,
it's so cheesy, man.
Yeah. It's just, and it's also just Harrison Ford is just too old, man.
He's too old. How is he doing another one?
Yeah.
You know, it's still on the IMDb for them to do another one.
Yeah.
He's gonna be like 94 years old, man. Yeah.
No
like
offense,
he was barely in 2049. He was barely in The Force Awakens. Like he was in it, but he was like
he's not running.
He's not running. Like
he's
right. Grumpy old man Harrison Ford.
Yeah,
that's what he's playing. It's like, who's he playing? Oh, he's playing, you know, the same character he played. He's playing Han Solo. I'm like, no, he's not. He's playing old grumpy Harrison Ford.
Right.
I don't know. To me, I like Shia LaBeouf. I think Shia LaBeouf is insane, and I love.
That's how we're gonna start this session.
Yeah, I do. I like Shia LaBeouf. I think he's crazy, and I like that he's crazy, and I like that he does crazy artistic ventures, and he challenges people, and he pushes people, and he literally physically pushes people. And punches them. I love that about him. Yeah. No, but for real, like he's crazy and he's got a problem sometimes with alcohol. But I feel like he's a good actor, and I feel like he does, man. This is coming from his mouth. He said it. He said it on freaking Kimmel. But I like Shia LaBeouf. I just feel like in this movie they were just like, you know that character you play on Even Stevens? Play that. Yeah, he's Even Stevens. He's crazy in Even Stevens, and he's basically crazy in this. I don't know. I just feel like he's a good actor, and he unfairly got, you know, destroyed by this role that he played in this movie.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's unfairly destroyed.
Yeah, it's also this kind of marked the end of his big run of blockbuster stuff. Of course, he badmouthed Spielberg, so you you're gonna badmouth the biggest dude in Hollywood. Like that's kind of a problem, right? But no, I mean, I think he wasn't the problem. I think the way they handled his character was problematic. The idea of, oh, there's his long lost son who's just coming in, and then they gave him the stupid haircut, and then like the monkeys who were swinging.
Oh, that was terrible.
They had the same haircut. Like, I don't know what's up with that. That was a little weird. There's a lot of weird moments in this, like that.
Just cheesy, ridiculous moments, man. Yeah. It really was. Like, I mean, obviously everyone talks about the fridge scene. The
nuking the fridge,
nuking the fridge.
It's literally a screenwriting term. They teach you in school. Don't nuke the fridge. Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh man! And then obviously lots of people shit on George Lucas for this movie.
Yeah, I mean Spielberg kind of shifted the blame towards Lucas. He was just like, "Hey, my friend made a movie. I just wanted to support him." But as a director, it's like when you get a script like that. I gotta say, there's some cool elements. Like Cate Blanchett as the villain, like. She's really cool. She's smart. She's intelligent. She's a communist. So there's a lot.
Damn commies,
there.
Bro.
Yeah.
Damn commies.
And I think that was interesting too, because again, they're taken from the 1950s sci-fi movies, which the whole purpose of those movies were a commentary on the fear of communism invading the United States. So by having her actually be a communist and being the manifestation of those fears in this movie, serves as a meta reflection of what they're trying to go for here. I mean, that being said, listen, if I'm being honest, I hadn't really seen it since I saw it in the theaters, so I don't really remember a lot of what
people hated.
Yeah, or I'm not even remembering what I really liked all that much. But I mean, I'm hoping they can redeem the Indiana Jones franchise after this installment. Now, my question to you, Ace: do you think they should continue this franchise, or do you think they should just cut it off right after?
Dude,
Last
man,
Crusade?
they totally should have cut it. It had a perfect ending with Last Crusade, and the fact that they kept this going is just clearly a financial thing. It's clearly them wanting to make money off of it. But stop it with Harrison Ford, man. I love Harrison Ford, but he really you can tell it's a paycheck for him. He even says it like all the time. He's like, they pay me to do this. I'm doing a movie. Why are you guys criticizing me? I'm an old man and I need money. And it's like, dude, I don't want to see grumpy old Harrison Ford in movies. If it doesn't even want to be there.
He needs to buy money to crash those planes, man.
Crashing planes, bro. Shout out to Harrison Ford crashing planes. I don't know. I'm okay. I'm still okay with the prequel idea. I think it would be interesting for an Indiana Jones prequel, like a young Indiana Jones, like young, like 20 or something.
Yeah, I mean they had the whole, rest in peace River Phoenix with the beginning.
They had that,
and it worked. Yeah, and it worked, and they even had the Young Indiana Jones television show for a long time too. So
there you go.
They could do it if they bring it back to something younger.
Yeah. Oh well, it's a hiccup, and that's what happens with directors sometimes. Let's you got any last words before you want to move on?
No, I mean there's really only a couple films left here that
I mean Adventures of Tintin is the one we'll talk about next.
And also like Adventures of Tintin I think is the one that really does feel like Spielberg remaking Raiders of the Lost Ark. Again, except this animated. It's actually is fun. A lot of fun facts with this. First animated feature Spielberg ever did. First time he's ever had a film that wasn't shot on digital. Because all of his films are shot on film. First time he's had a movie released in 3D. So there's a lot of firsts with this movie.
And first time, I don't care. No, I don't care for this. Again, what year did this come out? 2011.
Yeah.
I did not. 2011. I did not give a crap about this movie. Oh no, not at all.
It was based on a popular French comic book that a lot of people.
Ding. Yeah. For me, it just, I don't know. A lot of people probably enjoy it. This is just a personal thing for me, but personally, it doesn't do it for me, man. Like I'm not invested in the type of animation. I'm not invested in what they were going for. On many different levels, it just didn't hit me. I don't know. What do you think of this movie?
Yeah, I mean, it's not bad. It's kind of just not memorable in a sense. I know they were planning a whole trilogy. I mean, he produced this with Peter Jackson. So I know the whole trilogy idea was Spielberg directs the first, Peter Jackson directs the second, and Andy Serkis was supposed to direct the third one. Andy Serkis, of course, plays the main bad guy in this movie.
He's the king of mocap.
Right. The king of mocap, and this movie's all mocap. So, which also another fact, the camera actually never stops moving in this movie. Like there's never just a static shot on a tripod. It's always either handheld or camera's like swerving all over the place, which I think is
crazy.
Funny. Yeah,
it's interesting.
So I think this movie, I mean, it's fine. I'm more interested to see where they go. Of course, the motion capture, this was also during the time where like Robert Zemeckis was doing it big with that, but it was also a time where it started flopping too. Like 2011 was the same year that we saw Mars Meets Moms, that that epic Disney failure that actually caused them to shut down a whole production company.
Because this is not cheap, man.
Yeah,
this
yeah.
type of technology is not cheap.
Yeah. I mean, imagine you have to literally animate the entire world around these people, and plus take the performances of the actors and put those on, and basically recalibrate from a facial perspective from there to somewhere else. But you know, again, this is a movie that obviously was very important to Spielberg. Jamie Bell plays the lead role, and he also plays the lead role in the other 2011 Spielberg movie, War Horse, which we're also going to talk about on the other side of this podcast. But it's just fascinating how he was interested in this kind of obscure in the modern times, at least the comic book that's based on, but really had a lot of influence on the films that he were doing. Like, you know, we talk about how visually and cinematically it's more of a remake of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Raiders of the Lost Ark was kind of aping a lot of the original comic book that's based on. So again, it's just funny how it's reinterpreted in a lot of those ways. So
yeah, man, it's an adaptation of an adaptation.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Of his adaptation of that adaptation.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I mean, our next film that we want to talk about is obviously BFG, which is about a giant world that a little girl comes into, and that neither of us have seen, unfortunately. Hey, it might be an awesome movie, but neither of us have seen it. So
yeah,
it's one of those films that I just missed, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
And it's another, I guess, mocap performance by Mark Rylance. So there you go with that. But that is where we're going to leave you guys, because we didn't see that movie. Please tell us your favorite genre Spielberg movie.
And Ready Player One is next.
Ready Player One.
Are you excited for Ready Player One?
Tell us if you're excited for Ready Player One. Tell us your favorite genre type movie of Spielberg, and what Spielberg means to you on a personal level. Because I think if what we learned throughout all this podcast is that that's what he's focused on. He's focused on making you feel certain emotions in every one of his films. And that is pretty much what makes Spielberg the great director that he is that he focuses on getting emotions out of the audience. Mm-hmm. So tell us your favorite Spielberg film, and tell us what he means to you personally on a personal level. Because obviously, at some point in your life, Spielberg probably made a film that you saw as a child. Because he's been making films for a while, guys. Join us on our next podcast, guys. Hope you had a happy Christmas. I am Ace.
This is RB3.
And that was a Meet Enough podcast. Peace out, guys.